Resilient ownership, the practical philosophy of habits, grit, and empowered leadership. Chapter 9. Radical Candor, caring personally while challenging directly. In the philosophy of resilient ownership, radical candor serves as the essential communication discipline that keeps growth honest, relationships strong, and performance high. It is the practice of caring personally about the people you work with while simultaneously challenging them directly with clear, specific feedback. This combination, high care paired with high directness, creates the conditions for rapid development without damaging trust or motivation. Without radical candor, the growth mindset remains vague aspiration. Atomic habits lack correction when they drift. Intrinsic drive loses alignment. Extreme ownership becomes polite avoidance. Grit turns into unexamined effort, and teams slip back into the 5 dysfunctions. Radical candor is the rigorous feedback loop that makes every other principle in resilient ownership sharper, more effective, and sustainably human. The framework is visually simple, yet behaviorally demanding. Imagine a 2x2 grid with care personally on one axis and challenge directly on the other. The quadrant of high care and high directness is radical candor. Low care with high directness becomes obnoxious aggression, feedback that feels like an attack. High care with low directness slides into ruinous empathy, sugarcoating or avoiding truth to spare feelings. Low care and low directness produces manipulative insincerity or outright neglect. Radical candor occupies the healthy sweet spot where feedback is both kind and clear, compassionate and rigorous. It rejects the false choice between being nice or being tough. In resilient ownership, leaders learn to be both at once, because genuine care for people's long-term success demands telling them the truth about their current performance and potential. This practice integrates directly with the growth mindset foundation. Chapter 1. When abilities are understood as expandable through effort, feedback stops being a verdict on fixed worth and becomes actionable guidance for development. A radical candor conversation sounds like, "I care about your growth here, and I believe you have the capacity to close this gap. Here's specifically what I'm seeing, why it matters, and what improvement could look like." The recipient, operating from a growth orientation, hears investment rather than judgment. This alignment prevents defensiveness and accelerates the learning cycle that compounds small improvements into mastery. Atomic habits, Chapter 2, benefit enormously from radical candor. Daily systems require regular calibration. Without direct feedback, small drifts compound into major problems. A leader using radical candor might say, "I've noticed the morning review habit has become less consistent, and I care about you maintaining that discipline because it drives your ownership. Let's look at what's getting in the way and adjust the system." This combination of care and directness makes habit correction collaborative and motivating rather than punitive. The 4 laws of behavior change, making cues obvious, cravings attractive, responses easy, and rewards satisfying, can be refined through candid input from coaches, peers, or leaders who see blind spots the individual cannot. Intrinsic drive, Chapter 3, is preserved and strengthened by radical candor. Autonomy thrives when people receive clear information about how their choices affect outcomes, allowing them to adjust without guesswork. Mastery accelerates because specific, direct challenges highlight exact skill gaps, while personal care ensures the feedback lands as support for growth, rather than criticism of identity. Purpose stays aligned when leaders connect feedback to the larger mission. This adjustment matters because it directly serves the impact we're trying to create together. When feedback is delivered with both care and directness, people feel respected as autonomous agents capable of mastery, not micromanaged subordinates. Extreme ownership, Chapter 4, requires radical candor to function at scale. Leaders cannot own everything if they avoid naming realities in others or themselves. Radical candor creates the cultural norm where, "I own this outcome, and here's the direct feedback on how we can improve our shared approach," becomes standard language. It prevents ownership from becoming either self-flagellation or passive diffusion of responsibility. When a leader challenges directly while showing personal care, Team members are far more willing to own their piece because they trust the intent is improvement, not blame. This makes accountability feel liberating rather than oppressive. Grit, Chapter 5, is sustained through candid conversations that address mediocrity early and celebrate perseverance specifically. Passionate perseverance can stall when problems go unaddressed or when effort lacks direction. Radical candor provides the timely, specific input needed to course-correct without killing motivation. You've shown real grit in pushing through these setbacks, and I care about your long-term success here. The area where we need more direct focus is X. Here's why and how we can build that skill. This approach reinforces hope and purpose while preventing grit from becoming blind endurance or frustration. Genuine influence through empathetic connection, Chapter 6, supplies the relational foundation that makes radical candor possible and effective. Without prior investment in listening, understanding perspectives, and showing sincere interest, direct challenges feel cold or aggressive. Empathetic leaders build the trust account that allows withdrawals in the form of tough feedback. They know their people well enough to tailor delivery. Some need more warmth up front, others respond best to concise directness, while maintaining the core of care and challenge. This integration ensures influence remains authentic rather than transactional. Disciplined greatness and the hedgehog concept, Chapter 7, stay on track through radical candor. Maintaining focus within the 3 circles requires regularly challenging activities, initiatives, or behaviors that fall outside them. Leaders use caring directness to say no compassionately or to redirect effort. I appreciate the creativity behind this idea and care about your development, but it pulls us away from what we can be best at. Let's find a way to apply that energy inside our hedgehog focus. This prevents dilution and keeps the flywheel turning with disciplined action. Overcoming the 5 dysfunctions, Chapter 8, depends heavily on radical candor as a daily operating practice. Trust is reinforced when people experience care, even in challenging moments. Healthy conflict is modeled when leaders demonstrate that directness paired with personal investment produces better outcomes. Commitment strengthens because clear expectations are communicated without ambiguity. Accountability becomes peer-driven when team members learn to care enough about each other to challenge directly. Inattention to results is prevented when feedback consistently ties individual and team actions back to measurable outcomes. Radical candor thus acts as the lubricant and sharpening stone for the entire team performance pyramid. The coaching habit, Chapter 10, and radical candor work in tandem. Coaching questions create space for self-discovery, while radical candor provides the external perspective and direct input that self-reflection sometimes misses. A skilled leader might begin with powerful questions to understand the individual's view, then move into candid feedback where needed, and close with more questions that activate ownership and next steps. This sequence prevents coaching from becoming passive and ensures candor does not feel like a monologue. Practicing radical candor requires deliberate skill development. It begins with building the care personally muscle through the empathetic habits outlined in Chapter 6, remembering details about people's lives, celebrating their wins sincerely, and showing consistent interest. The challenge directly muscle is strengthened by preparing specific, observable examples rather than vague judgments. Feedback should focus on behavior and impact. When you missed the deadline, it delayed the team by 2 days and eroded trust. Rather than character, you're unreliable. Timing matters. Deliver praise and criticism as close to the event as possible, privately when challenging, and publicly when praising. Soliciting feedback regularly, asking, "What should I stop, start, or continue?" models humility and keeps the loop bidirectional. Common pitfalls must be anticipated and owned. Ruinous empathy often stems from discomfort with tension or fear of damaging relationships. It is overcome by remembering that withholding truth is ultimately unkind because it denies growth opportunities. Obnoxious aggression arises from stress or ego. It is corrected through self-awareness and the growth mindset's emphasis on improving one's own delivery. Leaders can use personal habit trackers or accountability partners to monitor their candor balance. Regular 360-degree input or simple post-conversation reflections. Did that land with care and directness? Accelerate mastery. In organizational culture, radical candor scales when it becomes a shared expectation rather than a leader-only tool. Teams adopt common language. Was that radical candor or ruinous empathy? Practice through role plays and celebrate moments where tough feedback led to visible improvement. This cultural norm reinforces every element of resilient ownership. Habits are refined. Drive stays aligned. Ownership is exercised honestly. Grit is directed productively. Influence deepens through trust. Greatness remains focused. Teams stay cohesive. And coaching becomes truly empowering. The deeper power of radical candor lies in its humanity. It rejects both harshness that breaks spirits and softness that wastes potential. Instead, it honors people by believing they are capable of growth mindset, worthy of truth, extreme ownership and candor, and motivated by meaningful challenge, intrinsic drive, and grit. When delivered consistently, it generates the grounded positivity that comes from knowing feedback is reliable, relationships are strong enough to handle truth, and development is happening in real time. Radical candor is therefore not merely a feedback technique, but a core operating philosophy within resilient ownership. It is the mechanism that keeps the entire system calibrated, honest, and moving forward. Leaders who master caring personally while challenging directly create cultures where people feel both supported and stretched, exactly the conditions where human potential expands most reliably. In a world filled with polite avoidance or brutal bluntness, radical candor offers the balanced rigor that builds resilient individuals and resilient organizations. This practice prepares the ground for the final chapter on coaching. When candor and coaching work together, leadership shifts from telling to developing, from directing to unleashing. The philosophy reaches its fullest expression when every interaction carries both deep care and high expectations, turning everyday conversations into powerful engines of growth, accountability, and excellence.